political structure and the economic impact on people's everyday lives around the globe has been significant would clearly be an understatement. As of yesterday, the Johns Hopkins COVID-19 tracker has reported over 35 million global cases and over 1 million deaths. Approximately 170,000 of those cases and just over 9,500 of those deaths were in Canada. In Ottawa, we have approximately 4,790 cases and 294 deaths as of today. However, as the recent municipal state of emergency for COVID-19 suggests, this number could rise very significantly, very quickly. Of note from cases reported by the City of Ottawa, religious organizations account for one closed outbreak, accounting to 6 individual cases. The image that you see here, this sort of mapping or geovisualization, is of COVID-19 cases identified in Ottawa, jointly produced by the City of Ottawa and the Ottawa Neighborhood Study. And in many ways, I would really encourage you, rather than necessarily going to the City of Ottawa's website to look at its mapping products, to actually go to the ONS, to the Ottawa Neighborhood Study link, as they really do provide a lot more finely grained mapping information than the city actually provides. And of interest, you may want to look at actually these mapping products to see how rates of infection correspond to the location of the specific neighborhoods, in fact, of your faith community and its membership. But to the meat of this presentation, what has been the impact of COVID-19 on the charitable sector of which faith communities are a part? Imagine Canada, which is a national organization, recently produced a report looking at the charitable sector and the impact of COVID-19 specifically on charitable organizations and charitable not-for-profits. What they found was unfortunate but not surprising, which is that 69% of survey respondents from charities saw significant declines in revenue, 30% have actually laid off staff, and 55% suggest that there possibly could be new and quite substantial layoffs. 54% saw that their charities had to transition in-person programs to online or virtual formats, and 42% have developed new programs to accommodate the sort of changing needs and the changing dynamics between them and their membership. 49% are having difficulty engaging volunteers. Interestingly, with that number, looking at the kinds of discussions that Volunteer Canada and Volunteer Ottawa have raised, Volunteer Ottawa, in fact, has a surplus of people willing to volunteer for different organizations, for different initiatives. However, what they are finding is problematic is while they have a surplus of volunteers, many of those volunteers are looking for fairly specific types of work to volunteer for that don't necessarily match the needs of the different organizations who are asking for them. Similarly, studies by the Sustainability Network have looked at the specific impact that charitable environmental NGOs are experiencing. And here you'll see a similar kind of trend, where 64 and 57% respectively of those charities that were surveyed are really concerned about their revenue stream and where that might be going forward, even really within the immediate future looking forward. And moreover, over half of the respondents said that this pandemic will have a significant impact on the way in which they think about their mission and mandate currently and going forward. In terms of the relevance of this then for what we're talking about today in the communities that we're trying to address today, given that we're a part of Faith in the Common Good and Creating Sacred Spaces Ottawa, really is the implication of the faith community sector, which is a part of that charitable sector, and the potential loss of faith buildings that oncoming. What we can see here is that a report recently produced, co-written by Faith in the Common Good, called Notes Space for Community, the Value of Faith Buildings and the Effect of Their Loss in Ontario, shows that, and this statistic is national in scope, that 1/3 of the 27,000 national faith buildings could be in danger of closing. And this report was actually done prior to COVID-19. And so the potential impact for what this number could be and what this could mean, given the additional strains and pressures that COVID-19 has actually added and surmounted to faith communities, suggests that this is actually quite a worrying trend and potentially quite catastrophic. And the reason why COVID might have even more of an impact on the number of closures is because the pandemic has cut into the revenue streams for many faith communities, both in terms of loss of volunteer work, which needs to be done and then subsequently paid for, loss of donations in person, and loss of rental income for the building. Most faith communities have had to adapt to different forms of interaction with their members, notably virtually, which actually has been advantageous for some and an easy transition, where for others less so. So for example, in Ottawa's West End, one of the mosques in Canada noted that they've actually had quite a seamless transition towards moving their membership online and to doing virtual kinds of activities. But that's largely because that particular community has been part of the technology sector within Ottawa for a long time, and therefore are actually quite familiar with virtual and online forms of transaction and communication, and are all quite tech savvy. We aren't necessarily going to see this kind of tech savviness or this ability to transition seamlessly with every faith community in Ottawa, let alone the province, let alone the country. But why highlighting this potential loss is important not just for your immediate faith community needs, but for all of us, is because faith communities are an essential part of the socioeconomic fabric of local communities everywhere. Their roles as engines of social and economic good is often underrepresented and poorly discussed. We've listed here some of the different ways, and there are many others, in which faith communities provide value to their neighborhoods, communities, towns, or cities. Thus, the impact of the loss of faith buildings might be catastrophic for those faith communities themselves, as well as other organizations, groups, and individuals who rely on those physical building spaces for their own revenue generating, for their own social activities, and for their own sense of connection to where they live. And so moving forward, or moving to the next section, what specifically have been the impacts of COVID-19 on environmental stewardship? And then really to the point of this presentation, how is this connected to building energy efficiently? More positively, one of the things we saw very early on within the pandemic was the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions across the globe. You can see here that by early April, there was actually a significant, quite unprecedented for many years, reduction in global carbon dioxide as a result from the global lockdown. What we also saw more positively was the reclamation of various urban or public spaces by animals or wildlife that hadn't been there before. There was quite a lot of notoriety around the dolphins that entered into the canals in Venice. Less notoriety, but equally interesting, the reclamation of urban space by chickens here in downtown Ottawa. What we also saw was the uptake in various sustainable practices and a real sort of interest in the notion of nature or going out into forests, into natural kinds of settings, alongside modes of transport, such as walking or cycling, that are inherently more environmentally friendly and sustainable. What we also saw, and here's a really clear example, was the impact of the reduction in transportation and transportation structures on greenhouse gas emissions. I'm showing you here one particular graph on road transport activity, and there's a similar one for flight transport activities. So for different planes, for different transport, they both mirror the same thing. But what you'll notice is in the series of maps or imagery around GHG levels within Wuhan, that the dip going towards this sort of end of January, beginning of February, really corresponds with where you can see significant reduction in NO2 levels going forward. One of the concerns, of course, with this is that as economies go back into states of normality, or what people have described as potentially that prior normal, that some of these things will be reversed. Also, potentially as a sort of offshoot of this, and slightly less positively, the decline in the use of transportation systems has also meant a decline in public transportation systems, many of which were developed precisely to reduce vehicular greenhouse gas emissions, as well as the economic impacts of reduction in transportation on supply chain and demand systems, trade, and geopolitical structures. Here in this slide, we're looking at the potential impact of this loss in terms of the local Ottawa economy, specifically looking at the economic impact of the decline in public ridership with OC Transpo, where as a result, really, I think largely of the fiasco with the LRT system, we were in around a $124 million deficit. And this has been compounded by fare revenues decreasing and costing, while we still had to keep the buses in the system running, therefore really pushing up that deficit further. Another less positive thing that we saw was the impact on waste management during the COVID crisis and actually ongoing, in particular with the disposability and the use of PPE. However, what has also happened during this period, during this time, has really been a coalescence of different movements around social justice and environmental justice. So movements like the Just Recovery movement or the Green Recovery movement have really highlighted the importance of moving forward in ways that showcase the importance and that materially reflect the need for our economies, for our social structures, to fundamentally think about climate change and to act upon it. One of the things really of note, though, for the purpose of this presentation, is that in any of these green recovery movements or wider discussions on sustainable economic recovery, what you see in all of these kinds of platforms is a really strong discourse around the importance of building energy efficiency and the need for the economies and the sectors that support moving renewables forward to actually be the focus of economic systems. So then how have COVID-19 considerations and recommendations affected building energy efficiency and building performance? One of the sort of mainstays of thinking about building energy efficiency and thinking about the ways in which we need to design air quality and building energy systems within building envelopes is through ASHRAE. And the ASHRAE statement regarding the transmission of SARS is important because what they're alluding to is that the transmission of particulate matter, such as viruses, can be mitigated through HVAC strategies within the building envelope. Here's what they recommend for non-medical buildings, such as faith buildings. Number one, dilute. And what that means is introduce more clean outdoor air to help dilute the buildup of indoor contaminants. This could be done through increasing ventilation with outdoor air, disabling demand control ventilation, raising minimum outdoor air damper or airflow set points, operating air handling units with 100% outdoor air, so no circulation, it's just you bring the outdoor air in, it goes out, you bring more in, it goes out. keep ventilation systems operating for a longer period of time. And what they really recommend is that it's run all the time. And implement pre and post occupancy purge sequences to flush the building with outdoor air. The next is the exhaust, which is about keeping local exhausts running, in particular restroom exhausts operating continuously. Contain. Control indoor humidity, and it's humidity levels which are really quite contingent in terms of mitigating the spread of particulate matter like the COVID virus. What we can do to that effect is to install humidity sensors, update control sequences, and add equipment or components to maintain indoor humidity levels between 40 and 60%. We can also disable discharge air temperature to reset for multiple zone systems during humid weather, and to ensure hot water heating systems are enabled to provide reheat for humidity control. And of course, clean, which involves safely using air cleaning technology as appropriate by upgrading filters to HEPA or MERV 13 filters, ensuring effective air seals around those filters, adding portable room air cleaners, potentially installing ultraviolet lamps and ductwork and air handling equipment, as well as retrofitting air handling equipment with suitable air cleaning devices. And that's all a sort of mouthful in terms of what they're recommending. But really what they're saying is that for the purpose of mitigating COVID-19, indoor air quality within buildings is significant. And it's significant because, and this statistic is was done even before considering things like virus spread, that indoor contaminants can be significantly higher than their associated outdoor concentrations. And therefore we must pay particular attention to what's going on within buildings in terms of IAQ and energy efficiency. But the impact of COVID-19 on building energy performance really is, to some degree, in tension. Faith buildings, many of whom are temporarily closed, or if they're open, they're reduced in occupancy, and yet you're still paying your energy bills. The other factor is that you feel, and you should, ethically and professionally, be trying to meet the health, safety needs of your membership, of your congregation. However, you should also be trying to operate the building as energy efficiently as possible. Where this, for example, could come into play is the impact of the increased use of cleaning supplies, which would decrease the indoor air quality, and therefore mitigation with ventilation and air filtration systems need to be adapted. We also need to look at the impact of comfort within our building envelopes, within our faith community buildings themselves. In particular, because a lot of people have, rightfully or wrongfully, complained that the discomfort of mask wearing is something that really we don't want to compound by then feeling a discomfort within the environment or the space in which you're sitting to begin with. And so you can see here that what we really have is that kind of tension between improving buildings for COVID-19 indoor air quality. And we know that people who've actually followed the recommendations have seen a decrease in rates of transmission against the cost for running those building systems and the feasibility of actually adapting or actually using the ASHRAE recommendations without modification. And in fact, in a lot of discussions amongst building managers here in Canada, what they've estimated is that if you actually were to follow all of those ASHRAE recommendations, particularly running your HVAC 24/7, it would probably increase your building cost by 30%, your energy use by 70%, and your carbon footprint would double. However, there are ways and there are best practices that come out of those ASHRAE standards, out of those ASHRAE recommendations to reduce COVID-19 that also are slightly more cost effective. So drawing from what they've actually recommended, here's some of the ones that you could probably implement without having huge cost or energy overrides. One of the ideas is to flush the building with outdoor air at strategic times. The focus certainly on good filters and air seals, is a cost-effective and important way of both enhancing IAQ and energy efficiency. System maintenance, just ensuring that your different HVAC systems are actually operating correctly and that they're clean. Installing humidity sensors and updating control sequences, and zone control specifically around lighting. Essentially, what we're talking here is about the importance of retrofitting, or the considerations around retrofitting your buildings. Now, if you're trying to reduce COVID-19 spread, in ways that are more cost prohibitive because you want to actually follow the recommendations and guidelines, one of the things you really should do is make sure that the rest of your building is energy efficient. And again, that has different levels of cost associated with it, depending on how much you want to do vis-a-vis retrofitting the building. However, we do know that buildings who are retrofitted, even at a bare minimum, actually reduce by around 20% CO2 emissions from those buildings and from the systems that are actually using the energy. Some of the more common low-cost saving opportunities, however, in terms of just thinking about general energy efficiency and retrofitting for the building, including lighting zone control. So assess areas that are overlit, identify opportunities to use automated lighting controls and dimmers, identify where reflectors can be added to amplify existing lighting, and where lights have been left on in unoccupied spaces. We also know, and again, there's a range of costs associated with this, that with the building envelope, identifying gaps, cracks, or other openings that can be weather stripped or caulked is important, and insulating and checking your building openings, also equally important for potentially energy saving and good energy performance and energy efficiency within your building. But how is all of this connected to the energy benchmarking program at GSS Ottawa? Well, what does energy benchmarking your building actually show you? At a very basic, it shows you how much energy your building uses comparatively over time, how much money you spend on energy, your carbon footprint, and how, if you're interested in it, your performance, your building's performance actually relates to others within the faith community sector, or even within your immediate geographic community, different types of buildings. In particular, for our energy benchmarking program, Creating Sacred Spaces Ottawa, what we see really emerging from this, or from adopting and from being a part of the program, are these 5 C's. 1, improving cost savings, that you should, by actually benchmarking and by really being mindful and understanding how your energy use is actually materializing, you potentially can do things to save costs over the long run. Comfort. Obviously, by understanding where it is you could be improving building energy efficiency, you also probably will be augmenting the comfort of those spaces as well. Community. Inspiring your faith community and others to be leaders of environmental stewardship and care for creation. Convenience. The nice thing here is that really we at GSS Ottawa will do all the work of gathering and analyzing your building energy data and saving you time and effort as a result. And also care for creation. Again, linking back to the rules and to the mandates and the missions and the intents of really thinking about why we should be doing more energy efficient, more environmentally responsible practices to begin with. But why is energy benchmarking your building especially important for COVID-19? And this is actually quite interesting because, again, in that kind of wider discussion that a number of building managerial organizations have been looking at, there's been an assumption amongst a lot of building managers and a lot of occupants of buildings that the reduction in occupancy of the number of people within the building would actually result in decreased energy costs. But this isn't always the case. In fact, they found in many cases it was quite the opposite. And so also, it'd be interesting to know whether or not that was going on within your own faith buildings. And that's something that we could actually see through benchmarking. Because one of the things that we have the advantage of looking at is taking your normal data and your normal energy sort of use and comparing that pattern to what's going on now. And where that's also important is because your faith community may have already developed a sustainability plan or a sort of plan of action for how to improve your building's energy performance. However, how might that plan need to be changed as a result of looking at some of the metrics from pandemics and from what's going on right now with COVID-19? Another really interesting and sort of fun ways in which you can connect this process and this sort of practice of energy benchmarking is to do things like treasure maps. And if you were to go to the Faith and Common Good website, you'll see that this finding the treasure in your facility, or these treasure maps, this energy treasure hunt, which has been developed by the NRSTAR and Portfolio Manager programs, which jointly are done by NRCan and the EPA in the US, really looks at ways in which you can go through your building and find different things that need to be fixed, different gaps. Essentially, it's a needs or a gap assessment of your building sort of going forward. And what's good about that is that if you do this in combination with a program like energy benchmarking, where you already have a sense of potentially where you may be having problems or where your energy use may be, not doing so well, it'll help to refine that sort of hunt for things. And moreover, it'll probably be more satisfying to you when you actually find those areas that actually demonstrate why your energy use numbers were looking like they were on the benchmarking data. I really want to conclude to reinforce the importance, now more than ever, when so many faith communities are at risk of potential closure, how important ensuring your building energy is energy efficient, not only to be champions of environmental stewardship and care for creation, but pragmatically for cost savings as well. To sort of conclude, we hope that you will sign up today for our program. But if I was to use and to really think, sort of sum up, using the analogy of COVID-19, what energy benchmarking does is very similar to what we're sort of seeing in terms of the constant public health reminders for assessing ourselves for signs and symptoms of COVID in order to determine whether or not we have the virus and to take a course of action based on that knowledge. Similarly, in buildings, we need to assess and check whether or not they're performing effectively and efficiently, both for indoor air quality and energy use. And one of the most effective ways to do a building checkup, just like we would do a daily checkup to see if we have any symptoms for COVID, is to look and see what your energy use looks like for both gas and electricity. And that really is the purpose of the energy benchmarking program, to provide you a snapshot of what your energy use looks like, both for gas and electricity, of your building over time, so that you can make informed and potentially useful decisions with that information. So thank you for attending the webinar. I will go back online. I will see if I can go back online. There we go. So thank you for that. And now I want to sort of turn it over to the people who've been manning or who've been looking at the chat to see whether or not there are any questions or comments, and really want to open up this forum for the rest of the time that we have to whether or not people would like to interject with stories of their own experiences around COVID-19 and what that's meant for yourselves, either personally or in the context of your faith communities. So, Emine, are there any questions?
Hello, thank you. Oh. Thank you. We don't have any questions now, but if anybody would like to ask a question, they can write on the chat box, or they can ask.
Actually, if you do have a question, just unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group. And I will stop share so I can see more people, and you can raise a hand as well. Was it just such a comprehensive presentation that it covered everybody and everybody's experiences? If that's so great. Thank you, Carrie. Do you want to say something? Carrie, do you have a comment?
No, I really just wanted to be affirming and
perhaps I could just, oh, I see somebody else has got their hand up too. But it's just in I appreciate your presentation. It's pretty clear, and with my role, I'd like to share it with different churches. And so I value what you presented very much. Just thinking about those who are sort of in a situation where they're thinking, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? We have hardly any people coming into our faith community right now because of the restrictions in numbers, and how are we going to get volunteers and so on. However, what I do think is important is that there are people within a community who are really keen on caring for creation. And I guess my question is just simply this: how can I direct that person to become familiar with what you have just presented today, so that they would be willing to sign up and be participant in the project?
John, we are going to be putting this in more material and more resources. We will be developing a website specifically for GSS Ottawa, such that really all of the information about our programming will be on there for easy access. I also think that if there are ways in which you can facilitate getting them to be a part of our sort of newsletter, such that we can start to provide them with different kinds of resources and links, that would also be useful. And of course, they can contact us at any time to discuss and whatnot. But we will be trying to leverage and to look at a wide variety of different networks to really reach people, as well as social media. Henriette, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks. Hi, my name is Henriette Thompson. I'm an interloper. I actually live in Waterloo, but I've been involved with Faith in the Common Good for probably a good decade in different kinds of ways. And I know that FCG has good connections here in Kitchener and Waterloo. I want to also thank you for a very informative presentation. And at the church that I attend, we have just replaced one of the HVAC units, which was aging and needed to be replaced after 20 years. I did ask some questions about, are we getting, what is it about the new HVAC unit that will also help us save energy and that kind of thing. But I appreciate the fact you pointed us to the treasure map, and I think that there are some good resources in what you've offered for me to work with the property people who are, doing the day-to-day maintenance and replacement of important things, and pointing them to the resources that you offer. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
And Henriette, what I was going to say is that in addition to that resource on the Faith in the Common Good website, they do have others. And we also will be trying to compile a list of other things in addition to what they've, to sort of supplement and to really consider different tools and techniques that are used to really think about improving or measuring energy efficiency and building performance. We will on an ongoing basis.
Terrific. Thank you.
Welcome.
If I could just build on what Ruth just said, you will find on the Faith in the Common Good website a DIY audit toolkit that you can download and literally walk through your site, and it will guide you through that. We have a virtual audit that's available as well if you wanted some guidance from our lead certified expert, Stephen Collette. We have our green certification program as well. If you look at that, you will see there are 3 different levels of green, and you can have your location be designated a, sorry, I'm just having a COVID brain freeze moment. Of the 3 different levels, and my internet is cutting out, so I hope you're hearing me. There are 3 different levels of green certification that congregations can fill out and apply for as well. So there are many different options that are available to faith communities across the country right now.
And Michelle, I think that ongoing, one of the things that my team and myself are going to be looking into is also, in addition to what's there, really bringing that to the attention of people here and building on that actual resource database, really, because I think, as you say, people are looking for those guidance documents and those simple sort of checklists as a sort of starting point or an entry point into this process of thinking about energy efficiency. Anything else? I'm just curious, one of the things that we're going to be doing in the next webinar is actually talking about the specific sort of stories around successes with the other energy benchmarking programs. But I think also what would be really interesting and something that we're looking to do at Greening Sacred Spaces Ottawa is to include more and a diverse range of types of stories that are brought to us by different kinds of faith communities within Ottawa, but of course more broadly than that. And I think it would be really interesting. I mean, if nobody really has that kind of lived, story to talk about now, feel free to send to myself or my team any of these kinds of stories that you're having in terms of your experience of COVID, both negative and positive, so that we can really share with other people within the wider GSS Ottawa community and more broadly to really help build those experiences and see where we can go moving forward. John, yep.
Yeah, just wondering, since some faith communities have already, I think, begun the energy benchmarking project, has there been any movement on some of the earlier sign-ups and what their experiences are so far?
We're just getting the interim reports out now to some of the communities, and we're going to be actually getting the rest of those reports out within the next week or so. And I think it'll be a good opportunity to really collect that sort of information and to really sort of start that process of, sort of discussion with those particular communities precisely on that point.
And perhaps just to offer the wider network perspective, the benchmarking program in Toronto, and actually in the GTHA, has just wrapped up. Excuse me. We had I think we had 103 congregations participate. The overall program had over 90% approval rating. And there were some side benefits, such as more than 20 new green teams were established as a result of congregations participating in the energy benchmarking program.
Well, and hopefully we'll see similar kinds of things happen as outcomes of the program here as well. And even though the requirement for Ottawa, and what we're hoping to do is to actually have 50 faith communities sign up in Ottawa. It would be lovely, you know, Toronto and Halton got 103. It'd be nice if we had 103 or more in the Ottawa area as well. You know, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of healthy, productive competition.
I like the way you think, Ruth.
Sorry, Carrie, yes?
I just, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. And I just wanted to mention, I don't have a specific story to share right now, but I've just been looped into some work that the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada is doing nationally towards a commitment to carbon neutrality by 2050. Now, the first question they're asking is, what's the scope? Are they talking about the national church plus every church building, or something? What does it look like? But interestingly enough, in a conversation this week, well, two things. One, I said, you need to talk to Faith in the Common Good and Green and Sacred Spaces. So they're based in Winnipeg, but national. So a lot of I look forward to the list of resources from today, and I'll definitely be sharing that with those folks. But the other thing that was interesting was we talked about the value of story and how it can, and Ruth, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but that it can really encourage additional action and engagement, just to hear what other people have done, even if it doesn't go 100% according to plan, to share those stories. So part of what they're going to be doing while they're kind of figuring out mandate and scope and all of that kind of stuff is to be looking at what has happened in Lutheran congregations across Canada so far, and then exploring how they might move forward. So also just a heads up that, I don't know if this is for you, Ruth, or for you, Michelle, you might hear from some national Lutherans in the not too distant future as they continue to sort through this process. And I'll also be sharing the slides or the recording of today's presentation with them as well.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. Thank you for supporting our programs. And we do have a hub in Winnipeg that they can connect with. So I'll send you something offline.
And thank you, Carrie. Like I said, I think especially because we really are looking for participant recruitment, if this suggests that there is that kind of national interest in this on the part of the sort of Lutheran Church, also an interesting thing for us to know when we approach those individual faith communities here, in terms of what really will draw them and is of interest to them going forward. Yeah. Anything else? Well, I think, you know, maybe, so Christina, I don't know if you're still on in the background, but if not, I will say thank you again to everybody for being here today, for listening to our webinar, our presentation. As I said, we have been recording this. We are going to, in addition to placing the recording of the Zoom meeting, of the webinar on different social media and other kinds of platforms and networks, we will also be accompanying that with the kinds of references, sources, and materials that we use to produce the webinar content itself. And again, really would like to open up, you know, take my email, distribute it amongst your networks liberally, and really any kind of interest that you sense that might be there for the program and for what we're actually doing, please let me know and forward that information to me. But again, thank you so much. And hopefully you will join us in our next webinar in November. Thank you, everybody.